Today, I'm going to start off by reading a very frightening and sad statistic published in a very eye-opening article on TheGuardian.com. The article states, young black men are 9 times more likely than other Americans to be killed by police officers, despite making up only 2% of the total U.S. population. Their rate of police-involved deaths is 5 times higher than for other white men of the same age. In 2016 alone, more than 250 African Americans were killed by police officers, and these numbers, instead of going down, have remained relatively constant as we start off 2018. As we all know, police brutality is unfortunately a huge problem in our society nowadays. Hundreds of unarmed and innocent African Americans have fallen victim to cases of police brutality that can only end one of 2 ways: serious injury or worst case scenario, death. My name is Tyler Glavin, and today, instead of discussing the general topic of police brutality, I'm going to be discussing the root causes that have let this issue flourish for far too long. Now, I have been studying and researching this topic for a decent amount of time now, and I have personally narrowed down the causes of police brutality to 2 things: racism and abuse of power. Both of these things play a huge role in the fact that so many African American citizens fall victim to police brutality every year. When discussing the origins of racism, I think it's hard for one's mind not to immediately think of slavery. Now, I know that different cultures and different groups of people have been enslaved over the course of world history, but when discussing U.S. history and our dark past of slavery, I believe that this is where the roots of racism lie. The enslavement of African Americans in the United States set this country up for a long, terrible journey of inequality and racist beliefs that unfortunately still exist within a lot of citizens' minds today, despite the fact that it is now 2018. And the minds of police officers are no different. Racist people unfortunately exist all over this country and occupy positions of all different occupations. From CEOs to janitors to police officers, they're everywhere. Now, unlike many other jobs, police officers have to deal with tons of different people from tons of different races and ethnicities every day. So racist elements that permeate the way a police officer acts may have a much larger effect than racist elements that permeate the way an office worker acts. In fact, it does. For this is why we constantly see headlines that read, "Another African American has been killed by a police officer," and never, "Another African American has been killed by an office worker." The fact that this is okay for police officers to do is extremely wrong, and something needs to be done. Almost all careers require accountability, yet when it comes to the police force, I feel as though they can do whatever they want and rarely face any consequences. Accountability is desperately needed within this career, and punishment needs to be handed out when it is deserved. The next cause, which comes from abuse of power, is constantly seen within this career. Abuse of power has been seen thousands of times throughout world history. Hundreds of leaders or politicians or business owners have fallen due to the fact that they have abused their power. Their ego grew too large and they believed they could do whatever they want because they had power over someone else, and police officers are no different. Their position of authority combined with racist beliefs is a deadly combination. When dealing with a black suspect, they treat them with disrespect and inequality, which a lot of times results in abuse, and their position of power makes them believe that they can do whatever they want because they're a cop. These beliefs are so wrong and terrible, yet they still permeate the actions of so many of our country's officers. These are both huge issues that need to be addressed immediately, and maybe then we will begin to see change. So I'm now going to move on to our interview portion in order to hopefully inform and teach someone else about this detrimental social issue and hopefully receive some insight on someone else's beliefs and opinions on police brutality. For today's interview, I brought in my good friend Ryan Jacko, who isn't necessarily greatly informed on this topic, but would love to share some of his thoughts with us. What's up, Ryan? How are you doing today?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So today, I really just want to discuss the topic of police brutality in America and get some insight as to what your thought process is on this problem.
Sounds good to me.
So you know how prevalent this topic of police brutality has been over the past 2 years or so. It seems as if it's constantly in the news. So I guess my first question for you is, what is the race of the citizens that you usually see in the news that fall victim to police brutality?
I mean, to be honest, unfortunately, whenever you see these events on like the news or social media, it's always like minorities, like specifically African Americans. You rarely ever see a case where like a white citizen was killed by a police officer.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think most people would agree with that statement. I mean, it's hard to deny, especially when you look at all the statistics on deaths caused by police among race. So my next question is, do you think that police racially target African Americans and treat them unfairly?
Unfortunately, there's these racist beliefs and elements of fear for some reason when it comes to dealing with African Americans. I'm not really sure why, but for some reason the police officers always seem to be scared when trying to apprehend a black suspect, and it's, to be honest, very racist and very wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point, especially when you consider the fact that these officers always state after they've hurt or shot an African American that they feared for their life. My next question is, what role does slavery play in this terrible issue that plagues the United States?
I really think that it actually all stems from slavery. For some ridiculous reason, white people always have believed that they have a sense of superiority over African Americans just based on the color of their skin, which to me is ridiculous. And although hopefully the majority of people will no longer believe this, for some reason those views are still embedded in some people's heads.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, and that really is a sad thing to think about. All right, next question. Do you think that older police officers play a role in the fact that these racist elements still exist in 2018?
Yeah, unfortunately, older citizens sometimes tend to have these racist views, so that may be where the element of racism comes from within the police system. The younger officers just need to be honest, avoid those beliefs and do their job the correct way.
Yeah, that really is a good point. All right, next. How do you think younger police officers coming out of the academy can avoid falling victim to these racist ways that their training officers teach them?
I think that they have to keep in mind that these are racist actions and wrong and terrible. Even though they're younger and being taught by an older police officer, that doesn't mean they have to listen to them when they're teaching them these politically incorrect or racially incorrect ways.
Yeah, definitely. So the next question is, how do you view police officers?
I think police officers are very hardworking, intelligent people, to be honest. They risk their lives day in and day out to keep the citizens safe. But I think 98 to 99% of them are good, have good intentions, and they know what they're doing. But that other 1 or 2% are the ones that carry out these terrible racist acts.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that statement. I've known many police officers, from family members to family friends, and they're all great people, but it's that 1 or 2% that do these terrible things. All right, so is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
To end, I'd just like to say that this topic of police brutality is a huge problem in the U.S. and needs to be addressed. Minorities, especially African Americans, are still being targeted, harmed, and even killed by police every day, so something needs to be done.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Rye. Well, thanks for being here today, man. I appreciate it and really enjoyed talking to you.
Oh, it's no problem, man. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
So by now, most of you can probably tell which side I'm in favor of and where my biases lay. I mean, why else would I be producing this project? This topic of police brutality is something I'm very passionate about, and I always have been. I personally just can't understand how someone could think that they are superior or better than someone else, strictly based off of the fact that they have a different color skin. I was raised in a household where I was taught to love everyone exactly the same, no matter what they looked like or what the color of their skin was, so this topic really bothers me on a personal level. I have no time for racism, so the fact that it not only exists, but exists within our criminal justice system, and it permeates the actions of so many of our country's officers, truly reveals that this is a major problem and it needs to be addressed. Now, I know that I'm not an expert on this topic, but I think most intelligent people who watch the news know that this issue needs to be addressed, for it affects the lives of so many African American families every year. I have done lots of research now between Project 1 and now Project 2, and the part where I constantly get lost comes from the fact that so many sources claim that these racist ways are embedded within the system, that as soon as younger officers come out of the academy, elder officers, tarnish them and teach them these racist actions and views. I don't understand why this happens and why younger officers listen to them. Maybe once the elder generations continue to retire, these racist views will start to die out? I'm not sure, but this has to be changed somehow. Before I continue forward with my argument and take action, I would really love to sit down with the current police officers to understand where these racist elements come from and why police officers tend to be more afraid or scared for their life when dealing with an African American suspect. This issue of police brutality is a huge problem in our society that needs to see change. Good citizens and good police officers need to continue to speak up and let their voices be heard. That's what's so great about America. The people can voice their opinions and hopefully they will be heard and change will finally prevail. Moving forward, I think some great improvements can be implemented within the criminal justice system that should have been there all along. I think a very large training reform will be a great start. Police academies need to begin teaching younger officers the proper ways to deal with suspects and that all suspects need to be treated equally, and if you don't, there will be consequences. Officers who abuse or shoot innocent suspects also need to see jail time or at least be released from the force. These topics need to be addressed, and maybe then we will begin to see change. But until then, we need to continue fighting for what's right. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Tyler Glavin, and I hope you enjoyed the show.